Hey there, this is Brittany from Just Be Crafty. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this really fun boom roasted grocery tote, inspired by my favorite show, The Office. It's a popular quote from our favorite boss, Michael Scott.
Boom, roasted.
This tutorial is geared towards intermediate to advanced crocheters and assumes you already know the following skills: chaining, single crochet, basic knowledge of intarsia or color work, and slip stitching. While this pattern is not difficult, and I think a very determined beginner could totally do this, I wouldn't recommend this as a first project. For the complete written pattern, list of materials, and intarsia grid, be sure to check out my free pattern on my blog or the printable version available for purchase in my Etsy shop. I'll have both versions linked in the description box below. Before we jump in, I want to take the time to invite you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and to hit the bell so you're notified whenever I post a new project. I share new patterns on Tuesdays and new stitch techniques on Fridays, so you definitely don't want to miss out. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. The back, the bottom, and the front of the bag will be worked as one flat piece. So to start with, we're going to be working on the back of the bag. We're going to begin by grabbing our main color, making a slip knot, and we're going to create a foundation chain of 63 chains. I'm finishing up my last few chains, and alright, I finished my foundation chain, and right now you're going to want to make sure you have the right amount of chains. You should have 63, and that's super important, so make sure you recount. Okay, we're ready to begin row 1. We're going to work row 1 by crocheting into the back bars of our foundation chains. You can find the back bar by rotating your foundation chain so that the back of it faces you. Place your first single crochet into that second bar or chain from your hook. Single crochet into each of the foundation chain back bars until you reach the end of the row. We're almost to the end of row 1. We're just finishing up the last few stitches. Okay, just finished my last stitch of row 1. Now we're going to turn our work. And now I'm going to pause us here. Count your stitches. Did you have 62? Because you should. You need 62 stitches at the end of this first row. If you don't, you'll need to pull all your stitches out and start over. And if you do, that's okay, because I have to do that kind of stuff all the time. Just make sure that once you've completed row 1, you have 62 stitches. Okay, now we're ready to begin row 2. Chain 1 and make a single crochet in each stitch across the row. I'm working on my last couple stitches for row 2. At the end of row 2, you should still have 62 stitches. Okay, I'm going into that last stitch. And now for row 3, we'll turn our work, chain 1, and we'll continue to single crochet across the row. You'll want to continue working back and forth in single crochet until you end up with 62 rows total. Every so often, you're going to want to check your stitch count and make sure you're maintaining 62 stitches per row. So this is kind of easy to remember. So each row should have 62 stitches, and you're going to end up with 62 rows total before we move on to the next part. So I suggest, if you'd like, pause here and meet back up with me once you've completed 62 rows of single crochet. At this point, we've crocheted 62 rows and we've finished the back of the bag. The next step is to work the bottom of the bag. We can turn our work and begin row 1 of the bottom of the bag. For row 1, we'll begin with a chain 1. Then we're going to grab 2 stitch markers and we're going to mark the first stitch of this row and the last stitch of this row. So just go ahead, place a stitch marker into that first stitch. Grab your other stitch marker and place it into the last stitch. And now we're ready to work row 1 of the bottom of the bag. So we're going to work row 1 by making single crochets into the back loops of each of the stitches. So as you can see, we're going into the back loop of that very first stitch. It might be a little bit tricky because we do have that stitch marker in there, but just do the best you can, or if you need to, you can always take your stitch marker out, and once you complete that first stitch, you can put it back in. So make a single crochet in there, and you're going to work into the back loops only of each of the stitches across the row. And as you work across this row into the back loops only, you'll notice that you're starting to create a nice straight line or ridge, which will outline the bottom of the bag. This ridge will also help you determine which side of your bag is going to be the outside as opposed to the inside of the bag. So the side that has this ridge, that will be the outside of your bag. Alright, I'm just finishing up my last stitch of row 1 of the bottom of my bag. So I'm just doing my last single crochet, and now I'm going to turn my work, and we're ready to begin row 2 of the bottom of our bag. So we're going to work row 2 by single crocheting into each stitch into both loops as we normally would. So we're just going to single crochet across this row as normal. We're going to continue working back and forth in single crochet rows up until you've done 10 rows total for the bottom of the bag. And remember, you should still be maintaining 62 stitches per row. So you'll want to just make sure that you're doing a quick stitch count every now and then to make sure you're maintaining 62 stitches. I've completed my 10th row for the bottom of the bag, so now I am going to grab 2 more stitch markers and I'm going to mark the first and last stitch of this last row. And right now you should be on the front side of your bag. So the outside of your bag should be facing you. Okay, and we're going to do the first row of the front of our bag. So we're going to start that row with a chain 1, and we're going to single crochet into the back loops only for this entire row. So you're going to single crochet into each stitch going into the back loops only. So once again, you're creating another ridge. So this will be outlining the bottom of your bag and separating the bottom of your bag from the front of your bag. If you'd like, pause here and meet back up with me once you've completed this row. Alright, and now I'm almost to the end of my first row of the front of the bag, still working into those back loops only. Now I've just got one more stitch left, going into that back loop. Alright, we've just finished the first row of the front of the bag, and now we're ready to move on to row 2. And we're going to start with a chain 1, and now we're going to single crochet into each stitch, into both loops of each stitch as we normally would. So for now, we're going to continue working back and forth in single crochet rows, ending on row 20 for the front of the bag. So keep working back and forth in rows until you have 20 rows completed for the front of your bag. Go ahead and pause here and be back up with me once you get to that point. Alright, so now it's time for the fun color work part. And the entire color work part is still done just back and forth in single crochet rows. But for the first row of our chart, it is just single crocheted across the row in one color. So I'm just going to go ahead and cross that out right now, because I like to cross out my stitches kind of as I go, just so I can keep track of where I'm at, and I suggest you do the same. So I'm crossing out that first row right before we do it, just so I get that out of the way. Okay, as you can see, I've already crossed out that first row, but right now we are working the first row, and we're just going across that first row of our color work chart. No color changes, still working across the row in our main color. So if you'd like, pause here and meet back up with me once you've done that first row. Okay, so I'm just about finishing up my last couple stitches of my first color work row, even though the color work hasn't actually started yet. Okay, so now we can turn our work. And we'll chain 1. And I'm just recrossing out that first row just to reiterate that I already did it. We're now ready to work our next color work row. We'll be on row 2 of our chart, and for even rows we'll be working the chart from right to left, and for odd rows we'll be working the chart from left to right. Looking at the chart, we have only one main color stitch before our color change. So we'll begin by starting our first single crochet, but stopping before the yarn over to complete the stitch. Grab your contrasting color and yarn over to complete the stitch. In the next stitch, we're going to single crochet, and as we go, we're going to be crocheting on top of our inactive colors. So just hold that tail out of the way, and we're going to single crochet in the next stitch, but we're going to stop before completing it. And now we're going to yarn over with the next color. So yarn over with our new color to complete the single crochet. And now we have 4 stitches with our main color. And I'm going to stop right here real quick, and I'm going to cross out the colors as I go. So I'm going to cross out the colors that I just completed. You'll want to continue working in this fashion. You'll single crochet up until the last stitch before the next color change. You'll stop before the last yarn over on that last stitch before your next color change, and you'll want to complete the stitch by yarning over with the new color. You'll also want to note that right now we're currently working on the wrong side of our work, and so this will be the inside of your bag. So as you go, be mindful as you single crochet over your inactive colors, and when you're working on when you have the inside of the bag facing you, you'll want to hold your inactive colors so that they're more towards you as you crochet them to make the inactive strands less visible on the other side of your bag. I like to stop every so often and cross out my completed stitches on my chart as I go to keep track of where I'm at. Continue working in this same fashion as you go across the row. I'm just finishing up my last stitch of row 2 of my chart. And now I'm ready to work the next row of my chart, row 3. So we'll be working the chart now from right to left. I'm just going to cross out my last stitch from the previous row, and I'm marking where I'm starting. So we'll begin this row with a chain 1, and we'll continue working our color chart in the same fashion. So you'll just want to note now that we're now working on the front of the bag. So I'm really trying to be mindful as I go to hold my unused color behind my work as I single crochet over those strands to help keep those strands that we're carrying hidden. Flash forward, and I've now completed the roasted portion of my intarsia grid, and now I'm ready to do the color work for the word boom. We're going to continue working in the same way until we've completed all rows of the grid. I'm now working on my last row of the grid, and for the last row it's just a row of plain main color, no more color changes. So if you haven't already done so, you can go ahead and snip your contrasting color, leaving a tail that's long enough to weave in later. This is what your piece should look like so far. I love how the text came out, and I hope you do too. You might remember that the back of the bag had 62 rows total. So the front of the bag will not need quite as many rows, and that's because we were crocheting over our unused strands when working on the text. So those rows actually took up more space than the rows on the other side of our work when we weren't crocheting on top of another strand of yarn. So you're going to work back and forth in rows until your bag's front panel is the same length as the back panel, which should be about 13 inches. So for me, that left me ending after completing row at 58. You may need to crochet less or more rows than that for your bag, but the important note is that both your front and back panels need to be the same length, which is about 13 inches. Your last row will be worked on the wrong side. Okay, so at this point, we've just completed our final row, and I've turned my work so that the right side or the outside of my bag is facing up. I'm ready to cut my yarn and secure. We're now going to clean up our side edges with some single crochet. So rotate your piece to the left so that the rightmost side is facing upwards towards the top. We're going to grab our main color and we're going to attach our yarn to that rightmost corner. Start with a slip knot. Attach it to our hook. And now chain one. And we're going to single crochet into that corner space. We're now going to make a total of 55 single crochet stitches evenly along the back side of our bag, ending with our 55th stitch into the stitch with our stitch marker. So we're just working into the side of the back of our bag, and we're just going to make 55 stitches along this side as evenly as possible, ending with our 55th stitch into the stitch that has our stitch marker. Alright, this is my 55th stitch and I am single crocheting into the stitch with my stitch marker. My next stitch is going to be directly on the other side of the little ridge we created to make the outline of the bottom of the bag. So you're going to place a single crochet directly on the other side of that line, and you're going to place your stitch marker into that stitch. This stitch is stitch 1 out of 10 that will go into the bottom portion of the bag. We're going to make 9 more stitches evenly along the side of the bottom portion of our bag, and the 10th stitch will go into the stitch with our next stitch marker. Replace your stitch marker into that new and 10th stitch. So we're going into that stitch with the stitch marker, and you're going to take out your stitch marker, and you're going to put it into that 10th stitch. And now we're ready to repeat the process of making 55 single crochet stitches evenly along the front side edge of our bag. I'm now placing my 55th stitch in this corner, and now I'm done with this side. We're now ready to cut our yarn and secure. And here's a glance of what your side edge should look like. Now we're ready to rotate our work like so, and we'll be working in the opposite direction but essentially doing the same thing. So starting in the rightmost corner, attach your main color and begin with a chain 1. Single crochet 55 stitches evenly along the front side of the bag, and this time the last and 55th stitch will go into the stitch before our stitch marker. Alright, so I'm just placing my 55th stitch, and now my next stitch will go into the space with the stitch marker. This will be stitch 1 of the bottom side edge of my bag. I'm going to replace my stitch marker into that new stitch. Make 9 more single crochet stitches evenly along the bottom side edge with stitch 10 going into the space that is next to my next stitch marker, but still within the bottom outline of my bag. So that's my 10th stitch, and now I'm going to take my stitch marker and place it into that 10th stitch. And once again, I'm going to make 55 single crochet stitches evenly along the back side edge of my bag. I'm now finishing up my last couple side stitches. Okay, this is my last stitch. And now I'm ready to cut my yarn and secure. We're now ready to build the sides of our bag by crocheting a short row along the bottom side edges, which are marked by our stitch markers. So right now you can pick either side, just make sure that the outside of the bag is face up, and grab your main color and attach it to a stitch that is located at the rightmost stitch marker. And you can go ahead and remove that stitch marker. So we're attaching our yarn. You're going to chain one, and starting in that same first stitch, you're going to make a single crochet, and you're going to single crochet into each of those 10 stitches along the bottom side edge of your bag. Your 10th and final stitch should be at the next stitch with the stitch marker. So now I'm working on my 10th stitch, and I can now remove that stitch marker. So you can chain one and turn. You're going to continue working back and forth in single crochet rows for a total of 62 rows. Alright, I've just completed row 62, and now I'm ready to cut my yarn and secure. I'm now ready to repeat this same process on the other side of my bag. Okay, we're now ready for assembly. With the right side of our bag facing up, fold one of your side panels in towards you. Grab the rightmost top corner and fold it inward so that your front panel edge is lined up with your side panel edge, like so. Then grab your leftmost corner and fold inward so that your back panel edge is lined up with your side panel too, as I am showing. You're going to line up your sides as best as possible, and we're going to pin in place with a few is towards your right. Line up your stitches as best you can, and then grab your yarn needle. And these yarn needles are my favorite because they have a nice angled tip. I'll be sure to have those linked in the description box below. So take a piece of your main color yarn that's about 3 arms lengths long, thread your yarn needle, and we're going to simply whip stitch the edges together to seam up the bottom of the bag. And we can remove our stitch markers as we go. And to start, I like to tie my tails with a knot and then continue on in whip stitch. I'm lining up my sides the best I can, and as I stitch the edges closed, I'm catching each side stitch that we made on our panel. So right now I'm working on my back panel. This doesn't have to be perfect. Repeat until you stitched this closed. Secure with your favorite knotting method at the end. And this is what you should end up with after seaming your first side edge. And you can kind of flatten it out with your fingers if you like to smooth it out. And I'm just going to secure with a knot. I'm now ready to work my next seam for this side, and I'm actually not even going to rotate my work. I'm just going to use whip stitch to stitch this seam closed as well. Alright, so this side is completely done. I'm now just going to knot my tail to secure. And now we're ready to close up our other side. So if you turn your bag right side out real quick, you can check out your handiwork. So see, that's what those seams look like. It's really nice, clean looking seam. All right, so now just make sure that you turn your bag back wrong side out before you stitch together the other side. So we're going to work this other side in the same exact fashion. Make sure that your bag is turned wrong side out, and you're going to use whip stitch to seam your side edges together once again. Okay, so we've now stitched up our sides and we're ready to make our handles and do the finishing touches. So with the right side facing out, you're going to count 8 stitches in from your side seams. So just pick one to start. So I'm going to start with my rightmost side. I'm counting in 8 stitches and I'm going to mark that with a stitch marker. So you're going to repeat that on both sides. So that's 8 stitches in over there. And now I'm going to take another stitch marker and go to my leftmost side and do the same thing. So I'm counting in 8 stitches inward. In these stitch markers, the reason we're doing this is going to mark where our handles are. So if you'd like, go ahead, flip your bag over, and you're going to do the same exact thing on the back side. So you're starting with your seam and you're just counting inward 8 stitches and then marking that 8th stitch with a stitch marker. And then repeat that on the other edge. And now we've marked where our handles are going to go. So grab your main color, make a slip knot, and we're going to attach that main color just a few stitches before our first stitch marker. This doesn't have to be exact. I think I did about 5 stitches prior to my stitch marker, but start wherever you would like. So we're going to chain 1, and starting in that same first stitch, we're going to single crochet. Single crochet into each of those stitches until we reach the stitch marker. Make a single crochet into the stitch with the stitch marker and go ahead and remove the marker. We're now going to make our handle by making a long foundation chain of 65 chains. And in my video here, I only made 50 chains, but decided to go back and make my handles longer, and I added on an additional 15 chains. So that's why in the video it might look like my handle is a little bit shorter than yours. And if you prefer shorter handles, do a smaller foundation chain, and if you want longer handles, make a longer foundation chain. The stitch count here doesn't really matter. Alright, so I've now made my handle, and now taking care to not twist my chain, otherwise my handle will be twisted, place a single crochet into the next stitch with the stitch marker. And you can now remove that stitch marker. So I'm removing that stitch marker. And now we're going to single crochet into each stitch around until we reach our next stitch marker. And as we go where we have the seams, we're going to hop over the spaces with the seams and only crochet into the actual stitches. And I think you'll see what I mean when you get there. So I have one more stitch. And now I'm going to hop over that seam space, and I'm just going to crochet into the next stitch. So see, there's that seam, and I'm hopping over that space and I'm just crocheting into that next stitch. It just creates a nice smooth edge for the top. Okay, I'm at my next stitch marker and I'm ready to make my second handle. So I'm going to chain 65 more chains to make handle number 2, or however many chains you did for your first handle, because we want our handles to be the same size. So however many chains that was, make that length of a chain. And remember, again, in my video I only made a chain of 50 but went back and redid it with 65 chains. If you want longer or shorter handles, adjust your chain accordingly and place your next single crochet into the stitch with the next stitch marker. Okay, so I've just finished my second handle and now I'm placing my next single crochet into the stitch with the next stitch marker, and we can now remove that marker. And we're going to just single crochet around in each stitch until we reach back to the first stitch of our round. And remember, just skip over the seams and only place single crochets into the actual stitches. Okay, I've just reached the end of my round. Do not join. You're going to continue on by single crocheting continuously into your first stitch, and we're going to move on to round 2. We're going to single crochet into each stitch. We're working round 2 by single crocheting into each stitch. And now we're moving on to our handles, and we're going to work our handles by placing a single crochet into each of the foundation chains for our handles. So as I go, I'm crocheting into the side of my chain and the back bar, but you can crochet into just the side of the chain or use your preferred method. Continue working in single crochet around your bag and on the other side for your handles until you reach the end of the round. Alright, I'm jumping forward and I'm just about at the end of round 2. And once again, we're not going to join, we're just going to keep continuously single crocheting into round 3. I'm finishing up round 2 and I know I'm moving on to round 3. And you're just going to repeat this for 2 more rounds. If you'd like, pause here and meet back up with me once you've completed 2 more rounds. I'm working on my last round. I'm almost to the end. And now I've reached my last stitch. And to even out my edge a little bit, I'm going to slip stitch into the next couple stitches. We can now cut our yarn and secure. All we have left is to weave in our ends, and I'll let you use your preferred method for that. And there you have it, the Boom Roasted Market Tote. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please let me know by giving the video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already and would like to, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new pattern. I typically come out with new patterns on Tuesdays and new stitch techniques on Fridays, so you definitely don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!